version. And I invite all of you in either language to get involved. And if you have any questions for Professor Phelps, the best way to deal with it is to take a look at the white paper and then submit your questions, not during this webinar, but at any time to Asia Times when you actually see fit and want to get involved in a discussion. I very much enjoyed David Goldman's discussion with Professor Phelps, and I hope so will you. Thank you very much, and can we please go ahead with the interview? Patrick, there's no video, no audio. Jonathan Tenenbaum has nothing. I have nothing. About 10 other people have nothing.
the Nobel Prize in 2006. I refer to your 2013 book, Mass Flourishing, and a subsequent book you wrote with a number of colleagues called Dynamism, about what actually drives extraordinary periods of economic growth. And now your white paper for Asia Times, which we released today, I think is a major contribution to the world discussion about economic growth, economic policy, US-China relations, and ancillary topics. So welcome, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you, David, for inviting me. Good to be here.
It's our great pleasure. Professor Phelps, you said that the concept of mass flourishing is your most important contribution to economics. As I said, that would make you the only Nobel laureate to publish his best work after winning the Nobel Prize. Could you give our listeners a capsule exposition of mass flourishing? And I hope that will persuade them to read your Asia Times white paper as well as your books, Mass Flourishing and Dynamism.
Yeah, let's hope that our listeners take a look at that publication. Well, the first theme of mass flourishing is that the century-long explosion of innovation in the West in the 19th century came from the imagination and creativity of people from various backgrounds and interests, not from the discoveries of navigators and a small number of scientists generally elsewhere in the world. The second theme of mass flourishing is that the experience of conceiving and creating new ways and new things and being involved in all that was hugely rewarding to people, maybe more important than the resulting gains in productivity.
Well, among the many honors you've received, one of special interest to our readers, for Asia Times, of course, is the China Friendship Award. That was presented to you by Chinese Premier Li Keqiang. Your book, Mass Flourishing, was a bestseller in Chinese translation. Premier Li praised your contribution to Chinese efforts at innovation. What can you tell us about your conversation with Chinese leaders and their interest in your work?
Well, I've been fortunate to have 3 meetings with Premier Li. As you can imagine, he has a wide range of interests. So we talked about several things over the years. In those meetings, innovation was a subject that always came up. He was keenly interested in entrepreneurship as well. I remember how delighted he was to inform me of the rapid rate of new firm formation that was occurring in China.
Let's talk for a second about the global dimension of dynamism, which of course is one of the principal subjects of your white paper and your books. The title of your white paper is Economic Dynamism and the Global Economy. You and your colleagues have compared endogenous innovation, that is innovation taking place in a single country, and imported innovation, the transmission of innovation among countries, amongst the major Western economies. Can you say something about innovation as a global phenomenon?
Well, in the 19th century, only a handful of nations conceived and developed indigenous innovation springing up from the nation at any rapid rate. For economic growth, most of the world was largely dependent for their economic growth on the innovation of about 4 countries. Britain first, America, then Germany and France. But now innovation, I would say, has become a global phenomenon, as you call it. But it has to be said that despite this democratization, the global rate of indigenous innovation in the present decade seems to be no larger than not larger than it was from 1870 to 1970. In other words, there's been no general in general, innovation has not speeded up around the world, and it's in fact slowed down in those 4 countries I mentioned at various times in recent decades. But some other countries, of course, have picked up in their rate of innovation. And one of those countries I'm sure we'll be getting to in just a minute.
This, of course, the subject of China's capacity to innovate has been one which has been debated hotly, if not rabidly, in the West. And that's a great segue to talk about China. In your white paper, you wrote, if I can quote, after the launch of reform and opening up, China's innovation was predominantly imported, although at some point in the present decade, indigenous innovation became significant. But as China runs out of foreign innovations it can import at acceptable cost, its focus is now on indigenous innovation. Now, do you expect China to become an exporter of innovation like Western countries?
Well, it seems to me that such an exportation of new methods and products would be a very natural outcome. And that will be interesting to watch. Yes, it's interesting to think that the U.S. and Britain pushed forward the world in the 19th century, and then the United States, pretty much by itself, kept things going over the first 2/3 of the 20th century. And now maybe we can look to China to carry the ball, to make a big contribution to advancing productivity in the rest of the world.
That's a big statement, and one which, as I'm sure you know, is controversial in the United States. If we could talk for a moment about the well springs of innovation, the sources of it. In the white paper, you wrote that the sort of economy that people want, and I quote, would be fueled by the original ideas of creative people and developed by entrepreneurial people alert to new opportunities and keen to start new businesses and developing new concepts into commercial products and methods and marketing them to potential users. This is the China that I hope will emerge. You've personally observed China over many years. You've spent a great deal of time speaking, teaching, meeting leaders in politics and business. Do you see the China that you hope to emerge actually emerging?
Well, all of that I think is occurring, some parts more than others. There's been a huge rise in the number of firms over the past couple of decades in China. I have seen with my own eyes many amazing new products and methods created in China. It's not just abstract. I've been in the factories and been in the companies, and I've just been bowled over by what I've seen, though I admit I don't go to many American factories. The resulting acceleration in the rate of growth of what economists call total factor productivity in China has not risen much, but that may be in large part because much of China it's not developed and it's not growing at a rapid rate. Once innovation is going on over all of China, I think we'll see amazing aggregate numbers.
If we could turn back to the West for a second, let me quote again what you wrote in your white paper. The West is in crisis, and so is economics. Rates of return on investment are meager. Wages and incomes generally are stagnating for most people. Job satisfaction is down, especially among the young, and more working age people are unwilling or unable to participate in the labor force, end of quote. When you look at the world economy with your decades of perspective on this, what worries you the most? And conversely, looking at the world, what gives you the most reason for optimism?
Well, being an American, I worry about what appears to me to be a fall of interest in exploration and creation, and a rise of interest in making fortunes. I think we also have witnessed in America businesses spending more time seeking advantages from the government and politicians and spending more time seeking donations from business than used to be the case, which is certainly harmful in all sorts of ways. I also worry about the damage being done by global warming and now by the coronavirus. We all have to hope that there is more international cooperation on these two fronts.
Professor Phelps, if we could talk about the economics profession for a moment, which you view, of course, from the pinnacle as a Nobel Laureate. In your white paper, you said some very critical things about the standard macroeconomic model, the default way in which economists look at the economy as a whole. We have many readers who are students of economics. What advice would you give today to a young person starting out to learn economics?
Well, I think it's very important for young people studying economics to understand that there is a significant variety of perspectives, and none of the existing theories take account of everything that is important. They don't take account of all the different dimensions of the problem. They don't spend the time to acquaint themselves with alternative views. So I think we could make a lot of progress on that. In other words, I think the way that economics is presented to students it leaves something to be desired.
If we could drill down into the issue for a moment, in your white paper, one of the issues that you cite regarding the economic profession is its, and I quote, continuing neglect of imperfect knowledge. And you write, in the interwar years, Frank Knight and John Maynard Keynes launched a radical addition to economic theory. Knight's book, Risk, Uncertainty, and Profit, published in 1921, and Keynes' thinking behind his general theory of employment, interest, and money from 1936 argued that there is no basis and could be no basis for models that treat decision makers as having correct models with which to make decisions. Knight, and I'm still quoting, injected an uncertain future. Keynes added the absence of coordination. But subsequent generations of economic theorists generally disregarded this breakthrough. Uncertainty, real uncertainty, not known variances, is not normally incorporated into our economic models. The uncertainty revolution still has not succeeded. Now, surely the issue of uncertainty and imperfect knowledge has consequent implications for economic policy. What can economists do to help policymakers do their job better?
Oh, good. Oh, sorry. Well, owing to uncertainty, markets are not able to act quickly. And so the markets don't quickly find their way to equilibrium. And that's why, as Keynes emphasized, government intervention is often advisable. And I think that's a theme that is resisted in some quarters in economics, and it's maybe overblown in some other quarters, which finds no use for markets at all. So yeah, we have a lot of ways to go, a lot of room for improvement there.
As a teacher, Professor Phelps, you taught and interacted with Chinese students over many years. What's your impression of the next generation of up-and-coming Chinese economists and Chinese leaders, the people you've met at Chinese universities?
Well, in early 2000, the year 2000, I had the good fortune. I'm sorry, 2010. Made a mistake here. In early 2010, I had the good fortune to be appointed dean of the newly created Nuwadu Business School in Fuzhou. And I met numerous students there and many more in my tours around China over the next 6 years. I'll never forget the night when I was invited to give a lecture entitled Capitalism and Socialism at Peking University. The huge hall was packed. People were almost literally hanging from the rafters. And the students were visibly excited, and so was I. So that was an introduction to Chinese students. Some years later, I had the honor and the pleasure, twice in fact, of giving a top talk to students at Tsinghua University, a wonderful university, as you know, and as the world, I think, knows. Many of those students were quite brilliant. I was hugely impressed. It was also impressive to see how knowledgeable and how eager and optimistic the Chinese students are.
And Professor Phelps, what advice would you give to the new U.S. administration, the Joe Biden government? And what advice would you give to the Chinese government correspondingly?
Well, I think it's important for the U.S. government to grasp that China has come to be a technological and cultural equal. China continues to work hard to eliminate poverty, while America has not done enough. I hope the Chinese government will continue to encourage and support the formation of startups with new and innovative ideas. I would like to express my hope that both governments try from now on always to be open to discussion and to work at surmounting the huge distrust that has arisen in the past few years. The US government, I think, ought to address immediately Trump's restrictions on Chinese students in America for the mutual benefit of American universities and Chinese students. Cooperation between the two countries can, I think, bring some huge mutual gains. China and America, having the world's two giant economies, must work together to rid the world of the COVID virus and all its mutations, and to put an end to the deterioration of the Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and climate. America and China could also cooperate in setting pollution standards for adoption by both America and China, which would set a standard for the rest of the world. Also, these countries could organize laboratories in which American and Chinese scientists could collaborate in gaining further scientific understanding of viruses and finding new methods of climate control. So the message I would impart is that the two countries and the rest of the world have much to gain from such cooperation.
Professor Edmund Phelps, Asia Times is deeply grateful to you for the white paper, which you've written for us and which we released today, and for your time with us today. I'm sure all of us, and China in particular, looks forward to the day when you can visit China again and continue your advice and counsel, which has been so well received in China in the past. And thank you very much for this discussion. And
thank you, David. Thank you very much for the invitation and for your wonderful idea to do that white paper, and for taking the time to do this very nice interview. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And